This is TWiT.
Should we start talking about this whole Samsung Bing ChatGPT threat, which we talked a little bit about on All About Android last night? The story is that there was a report, Google got a hold of word that possibly Samsung was looking into the possibility, let's say, of replacing Google search on its Android phones with Bing. And, you know, you can imagine probably a big reason for that is because Bing now has that chat, the chatbot functionality with it. But we started talking about this on the show last night and then immediately kind of got pointed to another article from the chat room. This article is from Android Authority that basically says like Samsung couldn't do that, which is a really good point because if you are, at least here in the US, you know, Google makes you sign, if you want to have Google's suite of apps on your Android phone, and that includes Google Search, you have to sign the mobile application distribution agreement, which basically says it's all or nothing, essentially. If you want the Google Play Store, you also have to have Google Search. So it's kind of hard to believe that Samsung would sacrifice that in order to do Microsoft Bing search on the device, but it's not entirely impossible.
Why would it be hard, Mr. Howell? Because isn't Samsung the same folks that decided, you know what, we want to de-Google our phones about 8-9 years ago and go with, was it Tizen and some other
well, but they weren't really de-Googling.
They haven't done it. I mean, their phones aren't running. They're still running Android.
Yeah, that's true.
It's Android, but that's not Google, right? Well, Android is not necessarily Google.
That is true.
Yeah, I mean, if you're talking about straight up like open source Android,
right,
you can run open source Android on your device and not be required to make that
Similar
agreement.
To what Amazon did with the Fire phone, because their phone and stuff was not necessarily a googly phone. It was just open source code.
Wait a minute. Here is me dramatizing, unboxing a Samsung phone. Big. But I can't imagine the customers are going to be happy with it.
Bing with a chatbot. That's magical.
No.
I feel like Samsung doesn't use like true open source Android, don't they?
No.
Android from Google?
They use Android from Google. That's kind of my point.
Okay.
And the point of the Android Authority article is that Samsung, of all companies, has totally agreed to the MADA, the Mobile Application Distribution Agreement, which basically says, you know, if you get a Samsung, you expect the Play Store to be on that device, or at least we do here in the US. And I mean, that's just the way it's always been with Samsung. And with most Android phones, most people buying Android phones do have that expectation here in the US, especially that there's going to be the Play Store, there's going to be Google Search, there's going to be Google Maps, there's going to be whatever, you know, insert your, you know, any number of Google apps that are installed on almost every Android device in the US here. And if they decided to go with a different search, they're breaking that agreement. They can't have the full suite of apps. They're no longer allowed to have Google Play Store on there. They're no longer allowed to have Google Maps or any of them, basically. It's like all or nothing. So that's the difference.
Yeah, I get that, but I swear I thought they at least toyed with the idea of doing just that several years ago because of you could sideload stuff pretty easily in the Android ecosystem and not necessarily have to go through the Play Store. If you want to do your own Samsung store or what have you, developers could still have their apps published there as well. And I'm sure they wouldn't mind having their apps published on Samsung devices because, you know, they're like the #1 manufacturer of phones in the planet, right? It's not the iPhone. The Samsung's the #1, right?
Yeah, I mean, but that would be a huge blow because when I think of Samsung, you're right, the numbers are huge as far as user base worldwide. Samsung is, I believe Samsung's on top, but I'd say the majority of those users are not users that we would consider power users.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
Side loading, no matter how easy it is an extra step. And it's actually kind of not super easy to understand when it's your first time side loading an app. You know, it makes sense to us. Yeah. But I think to the average person, like when I think of my mom having, I mean, she has an iPhone, but you know, if she was on Android, she'd probably have a Samsung phone. And if I think of her, you know, based on what you're saying, like, oh, but side loading is pretty easy if she wanted Google Maps. Like, I could never imagine in a million years my mom actually deciding, like, I'm going to side load Google Maps onto it. I just couldn't. She'd be calling me to do that, and that's a step too far, I think. Yeah, that's my point.
Okay, so here's some history if y'all want it.
Yes,
apparently,
love history.
All the way back in 2010, Samsung tried to replace Android by launching its own mobile OS called Bada.
Bada, that's right.
Bada Bing.
All right. Okay. I said about
2012, it tried again with Tizen. So there's Tizen.
Okay.
And then in response, Google bought Motorola.
Oh, yeah.
They were like,
I remember that.
Yeah, we're going to make our phones. We'll protect it. Yeah. And then in 2014, they sold Motorola because they apparently felt like they didn't need it anymore.
Yeah.
Apparently in 2017, the launch of Bixby, which is Bixby even still on the phones? It's on my phone. Okay.
Yeah. Bixby's still around, still kicking.
So that was kind of threatening, but they also have partnerships, not just on the mobile phone. The Tensor chipset in the Google Pixel phones is made by Samsung's foundry operations. They also they have a pretty tight partnerships with SmartThings and Google Home. And so, yeah, that's the history there, if that helps.
It did.
Internet.
It did help.
It certainly shows that I think along the way, Samsung would love, many, many times would love to have autonomy and kind of control the entire thing, which makes sense about Samsung. They're very much, all about their ecosystem. So even within the world of Android, they still have their devices playing nicer with their other devices than they do with any devices.
As big as they are, it makes sense for them to consider, why not just do our own thing? Because it's not just mobile phones with them. It's the televisions. It's the daggone refrigerators that I refuse to buy.
Yeah, but they've never done a good job with that stuff, right? People complain about what Samsung adds to the phone. I mean, it's like GM getting rid of the two major operating systems on their car. I'm not buying a GM car without being able to use Android or Apple.
Yeah.
They're bad at it.
To Samsung's credit, because I was one of those people for many years that said, you know what? This is the reason I don't have a Samsung phone, because there's too much crapware on top of the Android. And I just want to get to the Android. I was one of those folks. But to their credit, this last several iterations here of I guess you can go all the way back to maybe the S20 or the model right before that. The OS got a lot cleaner.
That actually was. So the article I'm referencing is from Make Use Of. They actually talk about the reason that happened is because Google was pushing so hard on Samsung to stop doing it.
Oh.
So that was part of their frustrations with each other and why Samsung was like, no, I'll build my own, darn it.
Yeah. Because, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, which is so anti-consumer. Bleh.
Queen Pruitt, she started out as a Samsung user a gazillion years ago. And then when the Pixel line started coming out, she got into the Pixel world and just like me, just likes clean Android. And I don't remember which Samsung model came out that she wanted to try. It was a Note line. So it's somewhere, one of the last time there was a Note. She tried the Note and it drove her nuts because the OS was just so cluttered with stuff. And she's like, I used to love the stylus and love navigating through, but this is just it's too busy. I believe that's the word she said. It's just too busy. She was used to the vanilla Android. And now fast forward to, I guess, 2021, she got a whatever it is, this latest Samsung, and she's back on Samsung now. She doesn't have a Pixel and she's totally fine. You don't hear her fussing about it's being too busy or just too much stuff going on. She's back in that ecosystem that she used to love, and it's cleaner now. So, I mean, I got to give them credit for that. I still don't want them, but
They've definitely improved that. In my opinion, in my experience, they've definitely improved that in the last handful of years. Because I was fully forever on board with this idea that Samsung, they clutter their devices with too many features. They go out of their way to make sure you know about every single little feature, and it gets really annoying, at least in the beginning of setting up a phone. Lots of clutter.
Remember all of the bubbly sounds and the little clicks? Everything you tapped on, it sounded like bubbles bursting.
Right.
And it's like, gosh, just stop all this cute stuff. It's a phone.
I'm not a 13-year-old girl.
Somebody likes it, but it isn't me. They have improved a lot of that stuff, and I give Samsung full credit. I just have a really hard time, I have a hard time seeing Samsung turn away from what is arguably the backbone of its success, in my opinion. I mean, Samsung does a lot of things right on their own, but at the core of it is Android and is the Google experience of Android. If Samsung, required you to install apps that run on every Android platform, but you've got to get them over here now instead of over here, I just don't think it would be as successful as it is right now. But maybe I'm wrong.
Just be negotiation. It may just be negotiation.
Yeah.
Just be saying we could go to Bing.
Yes, right.
But I also think this prediction will come back to haunt me. But I think that there's going to be a huge, not buyer's remorse, but installer's remorse on ChatGPT and search. I think it's going to be, the media is going to be so on top of every single thing it does wrong, libeling people and making mistakes. It's not going to deliver a good experience. It's going to be wrong because it's not meant to do this at all. And Google, I think the mistake Google is making is not saying we're the cautious ones. We're going to do it right. Oh, Microsoft's rushing in because they're so desperate. And I'm kind of surprised that Google isn't doing that. And they're saying, okay, we'll rush.
Yeah, they're kind of doing the opposite of that.
Yeah, they are. And
they're like, we don't want to be left behind. This is the first real major threat that we've faced, in decades.
It's not, I don't think. I don't think it is. Everybody's screaming. I just saw a piece of the Washington Post just now. ChatGPT will mean the languages will disappear. No, it could actually mean the opposite. Everybody's trying to find their profound experience. Elon Musk, it'll destroy humanity, down to it'll destroy Google's business. I think it's cool to start off with, but I don't think it's going to be a game changer for these companies for quite a while. Am I crazy?
I saw an article yesterday, maybe in Nature, and it was AI search engines are exploding in number. Are they any good? And I thought it was going to be an academic study. I was kind of impressed that they pulled it out so quickly, but it's not. It's an article.
It was clicky.
It was clicky. It was not that kind. That was not that part of Nature. And so, but it is a researcher who's evaluating large language models. It's someone from Hugging Face, which is Margaret.
Mm-hmm. Stable Diffusion.
Mm-hmm.
Stable Diffusion. So the gist of it was like, they're not there yet. And they're also, when they're wrong, they're wrong in ways that it's hard for people to understand or recognize. So they're really a problem. So that was kind of the gist of this article. But I was very disappointed that it wasn't more sciencey. So I couldn't say 30% of them have room for improvement.
I mean, we're at the beginning of this, at least this modern infusion or attempt to infuse what we think of as search and have reinforced for decades with this kind of more conversational, kind of do everything view that we apparently have about chatbots. Just yesterday, for All About Android, there were a couple of new phones released, a Xiaomi phone and a Asus phone and everything. And so I was kind of prepping it for the doc and getting it ready to put in the show. And it came down to the part where when I'm creating my notes and everything for the show, I had to start pulling specs and stuff. And in that moment, I was just like, shoot me. This is the last thing I want to do is transcribe specs for yet another phone. I've done it so many times. And then I thought, wait a minute.
AI.
I could open up Bing chatbot and see what it does as far as transcribing the specs, because I don't want to do it. And I did it and it did it great. I checked the data. The data was accurate. I was like, God, I kind of feel dirty for having done that. But I mean, it did the same thing I was going to do. You know, I still bring my own context to the show. So it's not like I'm just reading a robot. But yeah, so
I think
that was just a really interesting experience to me. It's like I am using search in that capacity to do something useful in a way that I haven't before. And if that's the direction that search is headed, like I'm interested in that. That's compelling to me. If you love all things Android, well, I've got a show for you to check out. It's called All About Android, and I'll give you 3 guesses what we talk about. We talk about Android, the latest news, hardware, apps. We answer feedback. It's me, Jason Howell, Ron Richards, TWiT Dow, and a whole cast of awesome characters talking about the operating system that we love. You can find All About Android at twit.tv/AAA.